Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where a bunch of writers who sit around, drink tasty beverages, and talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. There will be rants and raves and opinions that do not agree but are lovingly delivered. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Today's writing bench is David Welch, John Schmidt, and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 155, Interview with Don Fike. Welcome, Don.
Oh, happy to meet you. Oh.
We're delighted to have you. We understand that you are actually not just a writer, but also enjoy book clubs. So clearly you're a devourer of books as well.
Absolutely. It's really fun.
Yes. Well, I met Don at my second meeting of this book club that I went to, and I just have to plug this idea because it's brilliant.
Well,
this book club meets at a different microbrewery every month. It's like, I found my people.
It's definitely a lot of fun. It's the North County Beer and Book Club. Caught my eye 5 years ago, and I have never regretted joining them. They are really a lot of fun.
So after 5 years, have you returned to any of the beer places?
We reached a moment at the end of the last meeting where we realized that we had hit every brewery in the North County, and we're starting over again from the beginning.
What about wine bars and distilleries? Are you thinking of branching out, poetry, short stories, that kind of thing?
We do hit those from time to time. It's mainly breweries, but we have hit, mead and sour beers and wines and all that sort of thing.
Kombuchas are big down here too. There's several kombucheries.
Yes.
A kombuchery, is that a word?
It is now.
And the writer said it. It must be so.
Kombucheria? Yum. I love the idea. I also was really enjoying a lot of the photography. So it looks like from coming into writing later, you've started off and have amazing photography out there.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoy that. That's always been kind of my passion. Had to make a living as both a photographer and an art director. But when I retired, I really always wanted to do writing as well. So here I am.
So one of those creative people that does creative stuff.
Well, I try. I have fun. That's the first thing that happens. And then if anybody likes it after that, it's a bonus.
Well, it seems that you have an interesting middle area in between where you've gone from art to literature. And it seemed to be, you had a set that I loved out there that was picture with 6 words describing it. And I've seen a little bit of this done on Twitter, like write a story of this picture in 6 words. But you take that a little bit further, and that's kind of neat and fun.
Yeah, that was a fun thing over at the Oceanside Museum of Art, where you had to make the print a certain size, and you had to have 6 words with it, and it was juried, and that piece got into the show, and it's really a challenge, but it's kind of like short fiction.
Very short.
Now we have music juries, and they have court juries. Tell me about art juries.
Usually they bring in someone from either another venue like a gallery or art educator, from college, junior college, something like that. It just all depends on which. Sometimes the gallery owners are the ones that actually do the juries, but usually like Oceanside Museum of Art, they always invite people from outside based on their credentials and experience and things like that, and bring them in as a non-biased person to judge the artwork and select the ones that are going to be in the show.
And it's interesting as well because I'm seeing more with places like Instagram and other places that are more, there's picture and words. It's starting to kind of blur towards almost a new genre.
Yes. Well, it goes back to I think one of the most powerful connections there is, which is the image and language. And of course, that's also known as advertising.
That's true. And we can go on about subliminal advertising on another one.
Yes. That's a whole nother show.
So where did you get started when you started writing? Did you start with short stories as well before you launched into this, your first book?
Yes, I've always worked with short stories or a little poetry or just free writing, that kind of stuff. Really enjoyed short stories, but got to the point where I felt like sometimes I wanted to expand on details and things like that, and the short story really doesn't give you that room and space to do that. So that's what kind of pushed me more and more toward trying a novel. And I have to admit, it was overwhelming when I started. And I'm just amazed how much I've learned, and the fact that I'm still interested in continuing and doing more, because it was not easy. It was very challenging, and there was just a lot of stops and starts. But I'm so glad that I persevered and got through it.
Absolutely. So you started off writing, I think you told me, and leading up to this, there was a group called Bust Out Stories, and you had was it a self-published zine or an official zine?
Yeah. It was like he would run a class for about 3 months, and during that time we would all write short stories and critique each other's stories, and then we would select stories to go into the final magazine for that class, and then self-publish it and distribute it and things like that. It was in San Rafael.
So
And
sounds like you're an advocate for workshops then. That's a good place for a new writer to get going.
yes, I think so. I mean, especially if it's constructive criticism, you always need feedback. Being a photographer and artist, I've been, the life of rejection is part of the territory. So I don't have too much of a problem with that. I've grown a thick skin. So it's I like critiques where they're honest, straightforward, and constructive, and that's all that you can ask from anybody, really.
It's true. So your first novel here, thank you for sending us a copy. I got through the first couple chapters. The Merry-Go-Round is the name of it.
Yes.
Tell me about what came first, the book or the title?
Well, the title came way later. I went on untitled for several years. The ideas, the things that I was interested in. My favorite sci-fi movies are the Blade Runner 1 and 2, and Avatar and things like that. I mean, for me, those are the kind of the benchmarks. And I've always been interested in robots and robot love, and also the idea of what it would be like in the future when everything's very advanced. So this story is kind of like a story about a turf war on the edge of the galaxy, and the merry-go-round, which is almost like a futuristic truck stop where people stop to, get repairs, get refueled, and maybe have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, I got through the first couple of chapters too so far, and I mean, to me, it started reading like, or started out anyway, like just kind of a good old-fashioned space opera. But
Yes.
from what you're saying, it sounds like your tastes run more to the darker side of science fiction, maybe. So,
Well,
do I have that to look forward to in the later chapters? Or?
yeah, no, I mean, I think there's dark and there's light, and
Well,
no, I mean the one thing that I was thinking about too was like, okay, so today we know what drug pushers are like. We know how drugs affect people. What would it be like in the future? And of course, I'm sure pills and shots and all that kind of stuff will still be around for humans, but what about for robots? And that's where I came up, where I connected the dots with one of the other things I got stuck on, which is crazy. In Mexico, they have a kind of like a drinking game. I don't know if they still do it or not, but you used to be able to go into Tijuana bars, and there would be shocks for sale. Yeah. And what these are basically battery powered little transformers that you would hold on to two metal pieces of metal that are hooked up to this box, and for 200 pesos. This guy would basically shock you, and the game would be at the table. Who's the bigger man who can handle the bigger shock, and so on and so forth.
That sounds idiotic.
Wait a second. I remember this this wasn't just there. This was out in Colorado at like places that had a lot of video games. And it was a sheer vibration of who could hold on to it longer with the vibration and shocks.
I mean, the research I did, I found a bunch of articles, and I mean, they even got into things of people holding their hands in big circles and seeing how much they could run through 4 or 5 people. And so, I mean, this whole thing of electrically stimulating yourself and all that kind of stuff, the connection I made between that and this story was the fact that I wanted Booster Bob to be kind of like, I think one of the nicknames I gave him was a highlighter. That's kind of the slang for the time for a person who is an expert at basically getting people high, and especially he was specialized with robots. And the way that he would do that is to take this box that he called Sparky. And he would basically, connect up to the robot, and through analyzing their internal algorithms and their makeup and all that sort of thing, he could actually dial in kind of an ecstasy type of thing for them. And that's kind of the setting for the story where he lands on this thing called the merry-go-round, which everybody knows. It's famous. It's out on the fringe of the galaxy, and it's run by Sophia, who is a Freebot who is actually broker control programming and is a self-sustainable person and basically owns and runs the place. And then it turns into a battle about someone who wants to take it over, so on and so forth. But so that's kind of how it got started.
It sounds like it has elements of this. Kind of ties into our book club again, because the last book that we looked at the book club was the first book in the Murderbot series by
Martha Wells.
Martha Wells.
Also read.
I was going to ask if that influenced the novel at all, because there were some similar themes and so forth, including what made me think of this was the whole idea of sentient artificial intelligences who weren't necessarily carbon based or whatever, and what rights they have and all that kind of stuff.
Right. No, I had not read that story until we just read it for the book club. But obviously, I've read a bunch of different things, and like I say, the Blade Runner, I really like that.
Yeah, right.
I was amazed at the second one. I thought was I didn't know if they could come close to the first one, but I thought they did a really good job.
The movie Her, Spike Jonze, where basically I think it was Joaquin Phoenix is in love with a virtual AI that she doesn't have a body at all, but she certainly develops a personality. And I got that same sort of dark idea of it could be, what if there were consciousnesses, and, couldn't the same computer be in love with many people at the same time? And at scale, maybe I started thinking too much of cloud computing.
That's a classic, and I love that movie. I thought that was really well done, and the fact that she kind of matured and moved on and left him behind, which was brutal. But yes, I mean, I just love those kinds of possibilities of that. And there's no limits to the imagination of what could be.
Yeah. So how did you do this? This has clearly been a labor of, your first full-length novel. You mentioned a couple of years.
Yes.
We have had all challenges writing and focusing during COVID. Tell us how you pushed through it.
Well, luckily, I started before the pandemic hit, and I was filled with all kinds of doubt and didn't know how to approach this, how to work, and all that sort of thing. So I obviously did a lot of research, a lot of reading. Luckily, I also found a really good tool to work with, which I think saved my life. Scrivener, I don't know if you've heard of that.
We indeed have heard of Scrivener. So it's good to read another devotee of the Scrivener altar.
They should be paying us royalties. We
Yeah,
talk about it so well, you talk about it so much.
we should get a cut.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't see how, people without that can keep all the pieces together and keep it organized and, keep the thing flowing. Cause that really saved me, be able to put everything in one place and be able to, access it and all that sort of thing. The other thing that I did, and this got me through the COVID thing, was because I was so, what's the word? Not confident that I could sustain this over a long period of time. I ended up setting really low daily, well, first of all, trying to establish a regular writing routine, as you all know, is not easy to do. And then once you've done that, do you base it on hours? Do you base it on words, or do you just write, and so on and so forth? So I ended up coming up with a very low word count, like 500 words a day. Now, many days I wrote more than that, but with Scrivener, by setting that 500 word a day kind of mark to hit, I always felt like I had a good day if I could get past that. And, over time, literally 2 years, that it really worked. And the way COVID fell into it was almost an escape from COVID for me. I found myself, once I sat down and got started and got into it, it was, like going to another universe. And I found that very comforting and very rewarding during that whole time. It was already rewarding because I was finally getting things, rolling. But when the COVID hit and I couldn't go anywhere anyway, it just seemed like a nice side door escape into, another world with characters and storyline and all that sort of thing. So I really enjoyed it, and it really, worked out.
Did you work with beta readers, or tell me about your process of, okay, you've got a chapter. Where did you use some of what you'd learned in workshops in writing it?
I wanted to do the shitty first draft, Annie Lamott's famous words. So I did not change anything as I wrote. Other than obvious, mistakes that you spot immediately as you're writing. But generally speaking, I did not do any revision or rewriting. I basically just kind of got it all down on paper. And I'm basically at the point now where, after I've reviewed it a couple times and rewritten some things, it hasn't been, obviously, as you well know, hasn't been professionally edited yet and cleaned up and all that sort of thing. But I'm doing beta reading now, getting people just to see, what the reaction is to the story, to see what the interest is and see what the feedback is. So I've kind of put that all off until now, and then now I'm and because this is the first time, I'm spending an awful lot of time of researching self-publishing versus regular publishing and all that sort of thing as well. And probably we'll go through the self-publishing route, I think, at this point.
So the draft that we're reading is actually a pretty raw,
yes,
a raw draft then.
Right.
Okay.
What made you decide? I mean, which books are you reading? We're very curious about your tools, and saying, which made you think, yeah, maybe I'm going to go ahead and self-publish versus surfing around for an agent?
There's this one woman I follow that has put out a number of different books. And she literally just published this book because she's gone through the self-publishing thing. And I found it just very useful so far. And so I'm like halfway through it, trying to figure out, and obviously Scrivener also has some bonus things in it for formatting and will save you some of the work getting there, but you still have to do the copy editing and the editing and so on and so forth. So I'm still a ways to go. So I'm focusing right now just on the beta testing, our beta readers at this point.
That makes sense. And I do love the Scrivener does make it so easy to publish, and you pick your format, and not to be an advertisement for them, but it's very cool.
Dude, that ship has already sailed.
I know, right? That's the funniest thing is I tried to use it, but it didn't work well for me because I didn't think in terms of writing up little character cards, etc. But I bet it'd be great for a screenplay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would think so. I finally found the woman's name. It's Christine Kiefer, Kieffer, and she has a site that's called Well Storied.
Well storied.
Yeah.
And what did you love about it?
I just love, she's put out a whole bunch of stuff over her writing career about writing, and has been very helpful. And she's just recently kind of changed her attitude and gotten much more, what's the right word, frank about what she writes about and how she says it. And I just love it because it's kind of like, all these years she's been very nice and very courteous and very all this stuff, and giving you the information. And finally, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, the hell with it. I'm just going to tell you the way it is.
Somebody else who finally ran out of fucks to give.
Yeah.
It happens to everybody.
Exactly. So I like her even more now than I did, which I like, what she had to share.
So is this, because clearly when you hit the world building stage, it's bigger. Are you thinking series, or are you thinking what's your next idea for a topic? Or
that's a really good question. I didn't really write it with a series in mind, but because of the ending, I could definitely see that going further. But I'm just right now I want to kind of regather and let my imagination play again. It's almost like photographing. It's like I have to be in the right kind of situation to let ideas come to the surface and then play around and see if I can connect dots and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you'll pardon me if I don't wish for 2 more years of COVID. So what's your plan B?
Exactly. No, it's I do want to write another one, and I don't know whether it's going to be a continuation on from this one or not. In fact, I'm interested in reading the book that we just read, the All Systems Red, because there's short enough books to see how how that gets handled, because it is a little bit of a challenge to obviously write a series like that. So I'm still not sure. I want to see what the reaction to the first one is, and then give myself a couple of options on which direction to go.
Cool. Are you working on anything right now?
Just some short stories for the time being to kind of keep my hand moving while my brain is trying to figure out where I'm going next.
Are you see yourself mostly in sci-fi, or are there genres or nonfiction, or?
I love sci-fi, so I thought I was, safe start, especially, with that. And that seemed to work out okay. I don't know. That's why I want to kind of give myself some time to think about, maybe going a totally different direction. I don't know. That's why I'm hesitant to kind of commit which way or what I'm going to be writing about. So I'm kind of at a sweet spot. I like that before the next surge.
Right.
So, just to see what piques my interest and so on and so forth.
And what advice would you give to somebody who maybe has written a few short stories, but is thinking, okay, I think I have something longer in me. What would you say to that person? What should they read, or what should they start?
Well, the process is the thing that puzzled me at the beginning. And I read a bunch of things. One of the ones that made a lot of sense to me was the snowflake method, or where you kind of start out with a sentence and then you add to that and you keep building. Now, I didn't use that, but at the time it kind of made sense to me as not a bad way to kind of start. But for me, I'm a pantser, so I don't like outlining. I find myself, of course, I run the danger of not, ending up in a dead end and not being able to get out of it. But I really relish the idea of just writing and going through a series of things and then seeing where that leads and seeing where that leads and so on and so forth. Now, sometimes, I mean, in this book, I kind of had a general idea that it would somehow end up back at the merry-go-round with, kind of the final confrontation. But other than that, just generally, I didn't, I had no idea of what was going to happen in between there and how it would get there. So, I would say read different ways of the way people do it. Try and find out whether you're an outliner or a pantster or something in between.
We've heard advice that people have had of write the synopsis first, and other people have said try writing an outline. So I love that you're truly illustrating there is no one way.
No, absolutely not. I mean, whatever works for you is the right way to go, because I've tried all of it, and it just seems like at times, I mean, sometimes I will outline like a couple things. Because I've got a couple of ideas to at least the next couple scenes or something, but then I'll just let that go and then see where that points to next, and then that's when sometimes the magic happens, and that's the fun part. That's the part that I really enjoy. I was going to draw a corollary between that and shooting fine art photography. One thing I find when I go out to shoot someplace, and it could be in the backyard, it could be on a trip, it could be anywhere, I find that it takes me like 15 to 20 minutes, maybe even a half an hour of just kind of shooting whatever until I get into this kind of, well, in writing, it's called the flow. I think that's the new popular book or whatever, about where you just all of a sudden you start seeing things in a different perspective, a different light, and not the normal way that you normally walk down the street or whatever. And the same thing kind of goes for the writing. You just kind of keep going and see what happens. And, when you stop and you look up and it's been 2 or 3 hours of writing and you didn't even know it was happening, usually that's a pretty good sign.
And it does sound good. Yeah. Well, we will put interesting things, including your photography and the website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. Thank you so much for joining with us today. It is always great to get a new perspective of somebody who's finished their first novel. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very, very much. Good talking to you.
Excellent. Glad to have you here. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is done by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spiders are Dave Welsh and John Schmidt. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with the Morning Person, both by Michael Engberg. You can hear more from Michael Engberg on manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsors are Jackal Designs and Arm Street in Ukraine. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.